Are you a full-time artist? No? Well, neither am I. Let's talk about that. Hi, Shanna Rowe Jackson here from Caution, Artist at Play. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I want to talk a little bit about what it's like to not be a full-time artist. And while we're talking about that, I am going to show you some footage of my recent colored pencil piece, Taffy Time. If you are interested in learning more about how I created this piece, I do have a video up now where I focus on a piece of taffy and kind of explain how I created it. So I will link that in the description below if you're curious. All right, so let's talk about the subject of the video. A lot of artists online talk about finding balance as a full-time artist, but some of us are not full-time artists and we need to find balance too. And so that's what the subject of this video is. The first thing that I want to mention is that just because you're not a full-time artist doesn't mean you're not an artist. If you're creating art, then you're an artist. You don't have to be making a living at your art to be considered an artist. And I think a lot of us kind of confuse the two. Even I do, even though I've been doing art my entire life. I mean, I consider myself a full-time artist and a part-time pharmacy technician because art is my main passion. And so I can get down on myself occasionally as well. Even though I know better, I can still get down on myself, especially when I have to go to work and get up early and I just don't want to go to work. Like, it can be a bummer not being a full-time artist. But nonetheless, that does not mean you're not an artist. You can say that you're an artist even if you're not making a full-time living at it. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. There's nothing wrong with having a day job. We all have different circumstances and we all have different goals in life and we're all at different places in life. And so even if you're not a full-time artist yet and you do want to be, that doesn't mean you won't be. And it doesn't make you any less of an artist than a full-time artist. So with that disclaimer out of the way, let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of having a job outside of your art career. We all know most of the cons when it comes to not being a full-time artist, right? The biggest con would be time constraints. When you work a day job, it takes time away from your art. It just does. And you have to be on somebody else's schedule, which is always a bummer. Working for somebody else is always a bummer, but having to be on somebody else's schedule is a bummer. And depending on if you work full-time, part-time, that can make things more difficult as well. And if you have kind of a rigorous schedule, that can make it difficult to find time to create. The other aspect of that is also the fact that it can take a lot of energy out of you, depending on if your job is really like physically exhausting or even mentally exhausting. It can be hard on your days off to find time or motivation to create art. And so that's one of the main cons right there is time and energy. A lot of time and energy go into a day job unless you're just somebody who has no work ethic and you just go there and do the least amount possible, which, hey, no judgment on you. I wish I could be that way, but you know, even then, having to be out of the house and be away from the studio, that can be difficult and it takes time away from creativity. Another con to that is also it breaks up the creative flow. So a lot of times I'll be right in it with a piece and I'll be so excited about it, but then I kind of have to break that up by going to work. And then it can be really difficult when I come back to my piece to get back into that headspace of creating, especially if I've had a rough week at work. And so it kind of breaks up the creative flow and makes it a little bit more difficult to stay in that zone sometimes. And so obviously that is a con as well. There's also an added layer of pressure there when it comes to finding the time to promote your work, create art, when you work outside of the house. And then on top of it, when you're home, you need to be able to have time for your loved ones, for your housework. So there's a lot of places where you need to find balance because there's so many things going on. And if you have to be outside of the house, some of us are fortunate enough, not me. I say us, I'm not involved in that us. Some people are fortunate enough to be able to work from home, but even then, when you're working by somebody else's schedule and somebody else's rules, that in and of itself can be exhausting. And so it can be hard to find the time for loved ones. And so sometimes relationships will suffer as well because you're always on the go, whether you're at your day job or you're working on your art career. And so that is something that can be really difficult when having to work a job that is not part of your art career. Something else that can also be considered a con if you are like me is having to leave the house when you don't want to. I know that sounds awful, but I actually have anxiety, and so it's always a struggle for me to be any place but home. I really have to work extra hard emotionally to get myself to even leave the house and drive and go to a place that is not my home for a set amount of time. And I don't know if any of you relate to that or not, but for some of us that's a real struggle. And then one of the biggest cons to having to work a job that's outside of the home or that's not art related or just to pick up some extra money is the fact that you can get burned out really easily. Now, obviously, full-time artists really suffer from this because when you work a day job, you have set hours, you go home. As a full-time artist, it can be really easy to overwork yourself, but people who are trying to create an art career and also work have this same issue because when I'm not at work, I am working on my art. And so it can be really, really easy to become burned out because I can become burned out from my art stuff, but also burned out from work and really burned out from the combination of both. So that is something that is a real issue when you have so much going on in any career. And so that is something that, you know, obviously is a con. Obviously, when you have a day job, that's more stuff on your to-do list. And then you have to squeeze in your art career in your days off. And so there's always working. And it can be really easy to get caught up in that hustle culture. And so that is something to really try and keep in mind. Now, working on top of having an art career is not all bad. So let's talk about some of the plus sides of that. One of the things that is the most beneficial to having a job outside of your art career is the fact that you have financial security, or at least more financial security than you do if you're working for yourself. That is the biggest benefit, and I think that's why many of us artists have jobs that are not strictly our art career. You don't have to rely solely on yourself for your paycheck, and your paycheck is going to be more consistent. You're going to know ahead of time how much you're going to get paid. If you work a certain amount of hours, you know you're going to get paid a certain amount of money. You know when that paycheck's going to come in. It's much easier to budget, and it's much easier to, keep track of your finances and to make sure your bills are going to be paid. It's a nice peace of mind. That is the main reason why I still have a day job. I know when my paycheck is coming in, and there's some relief there. Also, if you're working full-time, you may also get some benefits like medical insurance, and that's much harder to get when you are a full-time artist. You have to seek that out yourself. You also have things going into your retirement automatically, going into Social Security. You have taxes taken out of your paycheck automatically. Unless you are a subcontractor, sometimes things get a little different there. But if you're working for an organization as an actual employee, a lot of this stuff happens automatically for you. Taxes for that part of your income are going to be easier than taxes for your art income, because a lot of that stuff is done ahead of time. And so that is a huge benefit to having a job that is not, that is extra with your art career. And the other thing that I really love about having a job outside of the house is the social aspect of it. Most of my really good friends, other than the ones I grew up with, have come from my job. They're coworkers, and I hang out with them outside of work. And even when I don't have time outside of work, I know that I'm going to have some social time when I go to work. A lot of times during the week, that's the only social time I get, because once I'm home, I am in art mode, and art tends to be a solitary activity, right? Like, most of us don't need companions to do art, and a lot of us who are working on an art business, we're doing it on our own. And so it can be really difficult to find that time, that social time, if you're a full-time artist. I know of a lot of full-time artists that they won't see anybody for a whole week. I mean, they might see their spouse when their spouse gets home from work, but unless they're going out and shipping merchandise or products to people, or they're going out and doing errands and grocery shopping, they may not see another human being for a while. And we are social creatures, even the most antisocial of us. I can be very antisocial. Social situations actually exhaust me. And so it's nice to have that balance. So I soak up my social time while I'm at work, get paid for it, and then when I'm home, I can be the hermit that I actually want to be, and I get that balance that way. And so there's a little bit of built-in balance in general when you have a job outside of the home, especially, that is different than your art career. And another thing that creates that balance is that it breaks things up. So I had talked about earlier how it can be a bit of a con that you'll be in the creative flow of things and you have to interrupt that creative flow just to go to work. But there can be an upside to that as well, because if you are so hyper focused on one thing, that can be unhealthy. And sometimes going to a job that is not art related, especially, although some people do have art related jobs, mine is not creative at all. It can kind of balance that for me. So if I'm so enthralled in my art, but it's getting to an unhealthy point, then my job automatically takes me out of that. And so it gives me that balance mentally. And also it gives me a fresh look at a project, because if I'm able to sit there and work on a project for days on end, sometimes I forget what I'm even looking at. Like, you know, I think we've all been there. You look at the artwork so closely that you don't even know what you're doing anymore. And going to work for a few days and stepping away from my artwork for a few days can give me a fresh perspective when I come back to the artwork, and it helps me to make adjustments that I may not have known ahead of time that I needed to make. And so that is also a bonus of having a day job. And also, because of the social aspect, you are meeting contacts. A lot of my coworkers, even though they're not artists themselves, they really love my art. All my coworkers know that I'm an artist. I make it known. Like, I'm like, yeah, this is what I'm doing when I'm not here. And so I've actually had a lot of people from work buy prints from me, buy artwork from me, commission me. And so actually one of my best collectors is one of my coworkers. She's a pharmacist and she loves my work, and she has collected quite a few of my pieces. And so just the fact that you are forced to be around other people automatically gives you contacts. Now, obviously, that's a little bit more difficult if you have a remote job. Some of these things are not going to be of benefit to you. You might be emailing people more and be in contact with people more, but you're not necessarily face-to-face with them, and there may not be the opportunity for casual conversation. And so, obviously, I want to put that out there. My situation is going to be different than everybody else's situation, and so some of these things may not pertain to you. So now that we've talked about some of the pros and the cons of having a job, and some of us don't have a choice. And so, you know, obviously if you don't have the choice to, you have to work outside of your art career. Like, I just hope that this video gives you the little bit of boost and helps you to know that you're not alone. But let's talk about some of the ways that we can balance work, life, and art. Now, one of the first things that I want to mention, and again, my situation is different than everybody else's, is if you are able to financially do it, it may be beneficial to only work part-time. Now, obviously, there are some cons in that, and the fact that, as I mentioned before, like when you work full-time, you may get some benefits that you wouldn't get if you work part-time, like health insurance and things like that. But in my situation, I have been at my job for 11 years, and I have gotten raises over those time, like over that amount of time. And so with that and the money that I bring in with my art, and also I have a very supportive spouse who is also bringing in an income, I'm actually able to be part-time. And so that helps me out a lot. Now, that was not always the case. I have had to work full-time in the past, and I even had to work full-time, and I was going to school full-time and still tried to find balance with my art. And so these are tips that I used even during those times. And so I'm hoping that some of these will help you even if you have to work a full-time job. So the first tip is that whenever possible, try to see if you can have a set schedule at work. Now, I know this is not always possible in every industry, but when you can, if you can get a set schedule, like for instance, I have my availability set, so that way there I always know when my days off are, and I can always schedule my art time outside of the time that I have to work. And I know I'll be home at a certain time, and that really, really helps when you're trying to find balance because you're able to think ahead. And so the next tip is to think ahead. Once you know what your schedule is, try to schedule art. Don't leave it up to the universe to give you time. I think there's a saying out there, and I'm not sure who has said it, but it's something to the effect of, if you don't fill your time, someone else will for you. And that's very true. There's always going to be things that pop up. So once you know what you're working, schedule some time for art. And I actually have a planner, and I just write down each day. I try to do it a week ahead of time. I write down my routine for those days. Like on Wednesday, I'm going to, well, actually Wednesday I work. So like Thursday, I am going to work on doing my voiceover or film or something like that. I try to set it out. I don't necessarily put times, although that can be really helpful, especially if you're really crunched for time. And so schedule your art, or else it may not end up happening. We all have a lot of responsibilities. We're all in the adult world. We have to pay bills. We have to see family members. We have to clean. We have to do all these things. And I would actually even take it a step further and maybe even schedule your cleaning and things like that, so that you know what amount of time you have for art, and you can plan ahead for content and for which piece you want to get. And even on the days that you're working, kind of steal time. And so that's my next tip. Especially if you have a wonky schedule, steal time whenever you can, whether it's your 15-minute break. Maybe use that 15-minute break to post your newest piece on Instagram, or to reply to emails or things like that, so that when you're at home, if you have other responsibilities at home, you can use that time for other things. If I have downtime in my day job, and it's not often that I do, but if I think of an art-related idea, I'll write it on a sticky note and throw it in my pocket. Steal time whenever you can. Obviously, you don't want to literally steal time on company time. You don't want to get in trouble with who you work with. If you're working a day job, then you obviously need your job, so don't mess around that way. But, just on your breaks and things like that, after work, if you're able to, use that time after dinner to promote your artwork, even if it's just 2 minutes to share a few links in some Facebook groups or something like that. Steal time whenever you can. And that's especially important when you can't set your own schedule at work. And then my next tip is, once you kind of have your schedule, try to make it into a routine, right? I think that helps a lot more if you know what your day is going to be like. And again, this might be the time where you want to add in things like cleaning. So maybe your day off looks something like a half hour of cleaning, so that you can make sure you're not falling behind on that. And then maybe you schedule 45 minutes so that you can reply to emails, and then give yourself a couple hours before lunch to create. And then maybe after that, if you're a content creator, use a couple hours of that time to edit content and edit videos and things like that. And then maybe in the afternoon, you may want to do some learning. So give yourself some time to read. And maybe you do that routine every time that you have a day off, so you always know that you have those tasks. Or maybe you alternate it. Maybe your first day off, that's your routine. Your second day off, you have a little bit of a different routine. But sometimes having the routine really helps you, because it's going to almost guarantee that you're getting those specific things done. And I should mention that sometimes it's helpful in your planner and in your routine to kind of highlight the most important things first, and then the little extra things that can go off to the side. And maybe you can do those little extra things on a different day where you're stealing some time or something like that, because you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to pack your schedule too full. And that leads to my next tip. Don't forget about yourself. Don't forget about your health. There is no art without the artist. And burnout is real, and it's unhealthy, and nothing gets done when you're in burnout mode. And so it's kind of like the slow and steady wins the race, as opposed to having the hustle culture, hustle, which can be hard when you have a lack of time. Like, sometimes it's good to just go at a steady pace. In your schedule, work some time in for relaxation. And if there's a day that you are just so burnt out from your day job that you need to relax, then listen to that. Relax. Maybe instead of doing a full piece, if you want to get creative because you feel guilty, because that happens to me. On my days off, if I'm not creating, I feel guilty because I have so little time to create, right? And I think we all have that feeling. Maybe just color in a coloring book instead while you're watching TV and doing something else relaxing. Take some time to meditate if you're into that. Take some time to relax. Maybe schedule in a nap. I mean, it's your day off. There's no boss there. You are your boss. Be a good boss to yourself on your days off. Be that boss that you wish you had at work, right? I'd love to be able to take a nap at work. I can't do that. So, take care of yourself. That is the biggest part of balance. That's why we need balance, is so we can make sure we're taking care of ourselves. Take time to spend with family, take time to appreciate your loved ones, take time in nature. And all of that stuff, all of that relaxation will help fuel your artwork. When you are well rested and you have seen new things and you've gone out into nature and you've experienced life, then that is all kinds of experience that you get to bring back to your artwork, to your content, and to whatever creative endeavor that you're involved with. And so that is my biggest tip, is to make sure that you are finding time for that. So that's basically it. That's what I do. And again, I'm human. I make mistakes. I don't do it 100% of the time, but these are the goals that I try to set in place and the tasks I try to set in place to help myself find balance as an artist who also works outside of the home. Oh, and the other thing that I wanted to mention is I kind of touched on this earlier. My job is not art related, and I think that helps a lot. I touched on this when it came to the balance of, taking a break from art. For me, that actually kind of works. And sometimes it's painful because I really, really want to be creative, but at the same time, that might be something you want to look into. Try to find something stress-free if you can, but I can't give advice on that because my job is not 100% stress-free, that's for sure. But, there's ways to find balance in that as well. But anyways, thank you so much. I'm sorry if this was a bit of a ramble, but I do think it's important, and I do want you to feel recognized. If you are somebody like me who does art and art is your main passion, but you also happen to have a job that helps you out financially because you are, a responsible adult and you need to pay your bills. I do plan on eventually becoming a full-time artist because that's the dream, right? That's the dream I've always had. But right now, I think I got the best of both worlds as well. And I'm very appreciative of that. And I hope that this video helps you appreciate your situation as well. And I want you to know that I see you and I appreciate you. All right, so thank you so much for watching. I will see you next week. If you like this video, please hit that thumbs up and subscribe to see more videos like this. You have a fantastic day. Bye. Wait, don't go away just yet. If you liked this video, you're sure to like this one too. Also, don't forget to hit subscribe.